Why, hello there. It is me, back again with more terrible content. We're going to be watching the second episode of the Linus Tech Tips Linux Challenge, and I definitely have opinions. I've already watched it, to be clear, to be transparent, I guess. I've already watched it, and I definitely have some opinions on it. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and get right into the video, and I'll talk about those opinions as we watch it.
Death to Microsoft! The open source community is ready to send you to your grave! Your tyrannical reign over PC gamers is at an end! Freedom! Is what I would say if I lived with Linus Wallace III over here in Fantasyland where any of that was true. So far, the 1 month Linux Gaming Challenge has been as advertised, a challenge. And in part 2, Luke and I are gonna be taking it to the next level by not just gaming on Linux, but by recording and streaming our gameplay to viewers on Twitch. Now, I'd be lying if I said I'm not expecting some speed bumps.
So, first big thing I gotta talk about is that I am actually a Linux streamer. I stream games like Metroid Prime, Baba Is You, I've done Kirby's Return to Dreamland, like emulated stuff, PC stuff, whatever. I've done a bunch of game streams over on my Twitch channel, which, you know, I definitely have run into some, I'm bringing this up because I've definitely run into some very specific problems with my streaming and recording setup because I'm crazy and I want to have very specific control over everything that I have in my recordings. I wanted to have separate audio. I wanted to make it so that, you know, computer audio was on one track, my audio was on another one, and my Discord audio was on a third, because that just gives me way more control in terms of how I record my videos and how they sound and how I can pace them and, you know, adjusting conversations and stuff like that. It just makes my videos better at the end of the day because it gives me more control over what I can do in the editing room. But I'm not expecting Linus to run into any of those problems during this because he is not as crazy as I am, but we'll get further into the video. He definitely could have done things different, at least in my opinion, as a relatively new Linux user. Like, keep in mind, I've only been running Linux for like 4 months at this point, so whatever. Let's keep moving on.
Immediately, I started overthinking things.
Yeah, that's very easy to do on Linux, let's be perfectly honest.
I tried to apt-get OBS, the industry standard for desktop capture and streaming, in the terminal, only to discover that Manjaro, the Linux distribution that I'm using, doesn't come with apt because apt is for managing packages on Debian and related OSs. Oops. Making life more difficult, the message that comes up when you try to execute the command doesn't say, "Hey, you should probably be using Pacman, you dunce." It tries to install some kind of dependency for apt, then just quietly fails and prompts you to do the same thing again when you try to use it. Infinite loop, baby.
So I have not used Arch, by the way. I never have, and I probably won't for a little bit, but I can understand the frustration of going from a Debian distro and then switching over to Arch and having all the commands, or at least a few notable commands, be different. I can understand that frustration and that confusion, and I'm not gonna get mad at him for that. I'm not gonna get mad at him for any of this. That'd be fucking ridiculous.
Speaking of which, I had a panic moment when I checked OBS compatibility and found out that it is actually unsupported in Arch, by the way, and its derivatives.
I guess this kind of prompts the question of what is official, right? OBS, literally, the name is Open Broadcast Software. It is open source. I mean, Streamlabs OBS, excuse me, just got into a whole lot of hot water because they were using the OBS name without OBS's permission. And so they were doing a bunch of nasty stuff in terms of like stealing the name, stealing the code, and just kind of trying to profit off of it. But if OBS works on Arch, but it's not official, well, what counts as official, right? Does the Arch version of OBS not count as official because it's not distributed by OBS, the OBS project themselves? Or, you know, just because it's open source, anybody can take what they want and use it and make their own SKU of it. Streamlabs OBS obviously was never official, but could you count it as official if it was the same exact stuff because it's open source? I don't know. It's an interesting question to bring up with this kind of thing. Thankfully, he was able to make it work, and OBS is a very powerful tool. I'm using it to record this video right now. So, hey, you know, OBS is good shit.
But the good news is that upon launch, I was immediately relieved to find that it works exactly as expected, with some exceptions. For example, the NVENC new encoder doesn't show up as an option, which appears to be down to NVIDIA's poop-tastic drivers on Linux.
Yeah, okay, I can't use NVENC encoding on my version of OBS. Actually, let me check and see what encoder I'm using right now. I'm pretty sure I'm not using NVENC. I am using X264. Yeah, I am using the X264 encoder, which I'm not 100% sure on the difference, but yeah, NVIDIA really needs to step up its game. Like, these videos, honestly, more so than just showing that Linus and Luke are trying Linux legitimately, you know, beyond all of this and beyond whatever anybody else, whatever some fucking Richard Stallman type Linux user would think from watching these videos. On top of everything, they're showing that a lot of these companies should step up their game and support for Linux. And it's showing a lot of people like, wow, this really does suck. We really should be pushing for this more. Or they'll just continue to laugh, or they'll just continue to be, you know, whatever. You know, you get some people who are like, oh man, I don't want NVIDIA drivers because they're proprietary and they're built by the company. And it's like, well, I mean, having a little bit of proprietary software isn't the worst thing in the world, you know? I was running Windows, and pretty much everything on Windows is proprietary. Hardly anything is open source there. At least not the very easily accessible ones. But, yeah, it's just, it's very interesting to see how many things don't work on Linux.
Side note here, I always kind of assumed that the Linux community was grousing about NVIDIA primarily for their locked down proprietary approach to things, and that it had less to do with the actual quality of the product. Now, I properly understand that it is definitely both.
Yeah, pretty much.
As mentioned, core product functionality from like a couple of years ago is missing. The control panel looks like it's from 10 years ago, and the interface is kind of confusing. This kind of confusion is not a deal breaker. It's just obvious that the Linux software has never gotten the kind of TLC from the UX team that the Windows software does.
I actually have a little bit of a side story that I want to tell. So, similar experience to Linus here with involving the NVIDIA drivers and how crap they are. Essentially what would happen is my desktop compositor would crash occasionally. And if you don't know what that means, it's essentially like graphical effects for my desktop environment. So like the little effect where the window like sort of genie lamps into the taskbar, or, you know, little transparency effects, or vertical sync on the desktop, you know, things like that. That sort of bit of the software would crash occasionally. And that got really annoying and really old. And eventually, it just never turned back on again. And I was so confused as to why. And I left it like that for a solid week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, before I thought, okay, you know what? I have to fucking fix this. I'm sick and tired of these tears on my YouTube videos. I'm sick and tired of seeing all this dumb shit happen. I'm gonna fix this. And I spent a couple hours trying to figure out what could even be the problem with it. And eventually it came down to, yeah, you need to check your compositor settings. And I'm like, okay, go into the compositor settings, and it's like, hey, we've crashed too many times, so we're just not going to enable it at all. And I didn't get any sort of a notification or like a little thing from on my desktop that says, hey, this crashed, it's not going to boot up again, check your compositor settings here. That definitely could have been helpful in preventing this sort of thing. I know it's a minor thing, like, oh, big deal, you don't get your fucking genie lamps on your Windows anymore, but still, you know, having that lack of that one instance where it just didn't tell me what happened was just really weird and very unlike Linux, but I guess that was just due to the NVIDIA drivers fucking up. I actually have no idea what ended up causing it. It said it was because of the GPU drivers, but it could have been fucking anything, right? So, who knows?
Window capture on Linux can be a little problematic. We couldn't seem to get it working at all at the start. I had an option for it, but it didn't work, and Linus didn't even have that. But a few days later, I tried it again for a different project, and it worked just fine. I checked in with Linus, and his did too. Neither of us know what might have fixed it, but that's cool, I guess.
So yeah, that actually ties back into what I was just talking about. Like, we'll talk about this later in the video, but Linus and Luke were talking about, and I was brought in on this fact too, where it's like, oh man, you never have to restart anything, you never got to turn things on and off again, or off and on again. There's none of that nonsense. And for some things that's true, but honestly, whenever something fucks up for me, the thing that always fixes it is turning it off and turning it back on again. And I don't have a problem with doing that. Like, if I were to shut down my OBS capture because some setting got messed up, it's like, okay, well, I'll just restart OBS, whatever. Sometimes that's okay. If I'm in the middle of a stream, though, that's kind of not an option. And so I actually did run into that at one point where I was trying to stream Metroid Prime one week, and I just, like, setting upon setting upon setting just happened to mess up in the perfect cascade of bullshit, and that made it so that the whole stream was just a big fucking failure. And it all worked just fine the next day after I had restarted my computer and, by extension, my OBS install. So yeah, that whole thing of, like, I'm learning now that whole thing of, like, oh, you never have to restart stuff kind of isn't true in a lot of cases. In some cases, yes, you can update your system and have it just update and you don't have to restart it, but there will be times where you have to restart, you know, commonly used applications just because something got fucked up. I get frustrated at Linux often. I stand by my decision to switch to it, though.
The bigger issue for me ended up being the software that just doesn't exist. There are third-party tools, for example, that allow key remapping. Keyboarding Master is evidently a popular one. But if your peripherals have a manufacturer-provided tool that is used to reconfigure RGB lighting, or the lift-off distance of your mouse, or the sensitivity steps of your DPI button, then get ready to install Windows in a virtual machine, pass those devices through, configure them, and then hand them back over to Linux. It's extremely tedious and doesn't even remotely restore full functionality.
So, okay. I currently am using a Logitech keyboard. I'm currently using a Logitech webcam. Here, let me actually, here we go. I'm using a Logitech Pro X keyboard or whatever. I think it's a fine keyboard. It doesn't have any software support, and it's never going to get it because I fucking hate Logitech software. I hated it on Windows. I'm certainly not even gonna try to install it on Linux. The keyboard works. I can control like a couple things via physical buttons on the board, and that is enough for me. I think that going into this with a setup that revolves around Windows and trying to make that exact setup work with Linux is a bad idea. Am I saying Linus is stupid for using the peripherals and the things he already had? No, that is not what I am trying to say. However, though, Linux is not Windows. And you cannot do anything on Linux and expect it to work exactly like it does on Windows. That's just not going to happen, ever. And so, while it's just one of those things where I'm sitting here thinking like, yeah, you're gonna need to change more about your setup when you switch over to Linux. But saying that to someone is not helpful in the slightest. And it's because of things that are just not in any of our control, right? We can't control what Logitech puts out on what system. We can't control where they release their software for. And so the obvious solution would be, okay, we'll switch up your peripherals. That's annoying and stupid and expensive in a lot of cases. However, I thought this was stupid from the very beginning. When I watched Linus redo his whole setup and put nothing but Logitech peripherals on his desk, I'm like, I don't even know why you put up with that software, bro. Like, I don't know how you're able to put up with it. Last time I used the software for my keyboard, it crashed often, the settings never saved, the settings were bare minimum at best, and just nothing ever worked at all. So it's like, why would you even try to use that software, even on Windows? But I guess that's just my own shitty opinion, right? Whatever.
The Go XLR has a handful of unique features, including decent preamps, reprogrammable screen labels, a built-in soundboard function, and the infamous beep button that I am so fond of using during my live streams.
So, I guess this is just a thing where I never actually thought about it. My audio interface that I'm using for this exact microphone, by the way, this microphone is an MXL 990 condenser microphone, and it is hooked up to a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. And I plugged that into Linux, and it just worked, and all of the inputs and outputs were just enabled, and they worked no problem. So, I guess I just got lucky. I guess just the magic computer gods were just like, oh, he happened to use the right thing. And I was actually looking into getting a Go XLR because I did like the fact that it was sort of a beginner mixer and preamp and all that stuff. And I thought, okay, well, first thing we check, does the software work on Linux? No, not really. So, not gonna get it. I'm gonna try to find something that works with Linux. And I guess that's just another instance of just like, yeah, going into this with all of your Windows shit, expecting it to work exactly like it does, isn't really a smart idea. But that's also the thing that every Linux user tries to sell you when they recommend Linux. Like, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating watching this video, seeing all the things that Linus is going through, and then seeing, like, with my own eyes, some of the arguments people are trying to make on things like fucking Reddit or whatever, because that's just like the fucking cesspool of toxic Linux users. It's so crazy to see this, and then I know for a fact someone's gonna get angry at him for X, Y, or Z, or even all three of them. Just whatever excuse they can come up with in their brains. Like, oh, he should have used this distro, he should have used this peripheral, he should have done this, he shouldn't have done this. It's like there's a million different ways that you can criticize someone and exactly how they run their distro. And that's because there's a million different ways to handle a problem. It's both a blessing and a curse with just like, yeah, you can do fucking anything in any sort of sense with all these different solutions and all these different methodologies. And then that also invites people to criticize you for not using the thing that they're familiar with. Like, it's frustrating, and I can see it happening in this video, and it's bringing out some feelings in me. Let's continue on.
The bad news about it is that, as far as I can tell, TC Helicon has given exactly zero thought to Linux whatsoever. But wait, there's a solution. All I have to do is follow these simple instructions to download a random script off GitHub and run it, with no indication given whatsoever for how exactly to run a script. Even the process of downloading it was unintuitive. And I know GitHub is for developers and not for end users, but it's really hard to hide behind that shield when it took me less than 2 days to run into a situation where I had to use it. I mean, at that point, if GitHub is only for developers, then desktop Linux is only for developers. You can't have it both ways.
I half agree with Linus on this. GitHub isn't exactly the most user-friendly of websites. You know, it's kind of hard to browse that site, and I agree that it is a little bit difficult to find the download button to get your scripts and everything. But it's not like paralyzingly difficult. You know, I'll disagree with him on that, where it's like he's getting really frustrated at this, and for good reason, right? Like, I'm not gonna get mad. Like, I'm not gonna say that his frustration is unfounded, because it isn't, you know. But to take it that far, where it's like, yeah, desktop Linux is only for developers, I'm not going to agree with that, just because not every person is going to be doing the same type of insane bullshit that he and I do on our distros. Not everyone is going to want to stream. Not everyone is going to want to even record gameplay. Not everyone's even going to be gaming, right? Like, I stand by my opinion that desktop Linux is absolutely fine for the average user, because the average user does like 3 things on their computer. They watch internet videos, they browse social media, and maybe they check their email or go on eBay, like, or whatever shopping website. All of those things are more than comfortably done. Like, they're absolutely perfect on desktop Linux. It's just when you start doing some of the higher end stuff that you need to have a very specific mindset to actually get the most out of it with. You know, for things like streaming or video production or anything creative, you really need to have both an understanding of the art you're trying to do and also the technical aspect of that art and how it interfaces with Linux in general. And obviously, not everyone is going to be into that. So it's just I don't agree with Linus on everything, but I will agree that GitHub isn't the most user-friendly website in existence. Let's move on.
Anyway, I found a guide on how to run a script. I'm grateful for that, but I'm frustrated by the condescending tone. I mean, my assumption that a file with a .sh extension would behave as I would expect it to and launch in some kind of script running application doesn't seem that unreasonable. Newsflash, random contributor, you can also change a file extension in Windows, and it will attempt to launch in the default program for that file type. It actually serves exactly the same fundamental purpose, hinting at the contents of the file. The only difference is that these hints for the user are also used as hints for the operating system. It's actually a lot more convenient than digging into the properties of the file to find out what it does.
Yeah, sure. I can agree with that. I've done a few chmods in my runnings of Linux, like less than 5, you know, but still enough to where it's like, yeah, this just gets annoying after a while, you know. I am not the biggest fan of having to go into the terminal and chmod a file and, you know, do all of its properties and all that stuff. I agree that I think that it should just be, you know, you click it or right click it and say, oh, execute in this program. I feel like that'd be just easier for the end user. But like I said, Linux isn't Windows. I don't know. I'm half and half on that one, because it's like, hey, it should be easier for the end user to change files like that, and you don't have to use the terminal. I don't know. Like I said, I'm half and half on that one. I think chmods are relatively straightforward, but that's because I've already done them. So it's hard for me to judge a new user's experience on that kind of thing when I've already done it. You know, it's like a veteran Linux user trying to say that, like, oh yeah, it's really easy for any user to do this. You just go into the terminal and type, you know, fucking chmod fucking blah, 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 you know, you type some fucking runic scripts in the terminal and it just works because he already knows how to do it, right? It's hard for me to judge that kind of stuff now just because I've already done it for so long. So, I'm falling deeper into the rabbit hole. I hate it.
Until my GoXLR loses power for any reason, at which point I will have to pass it through to Windows, reconfigure it in Windows, and then pass it back over to Linux without losing power.
I feel like there's an easier way to do this, but I wouldn't know. I've never used the GoXLR, and I've never done any of the stuff that Linus is doing. I don't know how hard it is to do this kind of thing, so I can't really judge him on, you know, how he's deciding to run his peripherals. I feel like there's an easier way to handle all of this stuff, but what would I know? I'm not in his position. I'm not, handling things the way he's handling, so whatever.
The most notable issue I had was that my audio devices were just kind of screwy in OBS. My voice came across very unnaturally deep, and it sounded like my mic input had been duplicated.
My voice just feels deep right now. I don't know if I've got something lodged or what.
And
yeah.
Chat was pretty convinced that I had set something up incorrectly, and if I was a viewer of my stream, I probably would have said the same thing. But I've been using OBS for like 6 or 7 years now, so I had my doubts. I even streamed my OBS settings panel to prove it, but eventually, feeling out of options, I just restarted OBS, and yeah, that solved pretty much everything. Which was kind of frustrating, because I've heard time and time again that you don't have to turn things off and on again to get them working in Linux, but hey, maybe that's just because I'm not really great at Linux yet. Maybe there's something else I could have done. Not sure.
No, he's right. Like, maybe it's just because we're relatively... No, what? Like, Luke isn't a new Linux user. He's been running Linux for, like, years before he switched over to Windows full-time. So, like, if Luke, the experienced Linux user, is running into these fucking problems, then there's obviously an issue with either the pitch of Linux that a lot of veteran Linux users have, or with just how everybody is running it. Maybe there's some secret sauce that nobody has told anybody about. I don't fucking know. But yeah, you do have to restart a lot of stuff on Linux, and it's fucking crazy that the pitch that a lot of users will tell you is like, oh man, you don't have to fucking do any of that. You just fucking turn it on and it works. But it doesn't. Whatever.
PAMAC is a program with a graphical user interface that functions similarly to the Pacman package manager that you operate in the terminal. At least it does once you find the hidden button in PAMAC to search Snap, Flatpak, and Arch user repository entries.
Okay, hang on. Let's rewind that a bit. Linus is searching through things through the Arch user repository. Now that's not a problem per se, but I guess this is just like my concern with him running Arch in general, just because of its, rolling release setup and everything. I am a little bit nervous for how well his experience is going to go into the future, because already he's using a distro that isn't exactly tuned for new users. And then you add on the added complexity of the Arch user repository, and I don't know. I'm nervous for his future experiences, just because he's adding on a lot of complexity that doesn't need to be there. But, I'm just a critic. I can just sit here and critique how he's doing it all the live long day. Whatever. Maybe it's working out just fine for him.
I chose the most official looking package, and I was up and running almost immediately once I found the super convenient per application volume mixer in the bottom right corner. The interface is kind of kludgy, like scrolling with your mouse wheel scrolls through both the audio devices and the levels of the individual devices, which is not great.
Okay, thank you. I've also run into this problem. Maybe there's a setting to turn that off. I gotta actually fucking look and see. But yeah, because he's running Arch, which uses KDE Plasma as the desktop environment, and I'm also running KDE Plasma. And I definitely have run into that problem where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna try to scroll through my audio devices, and then, I've turned down this audio, whatever it is. And so it's like, oh, why is this game or why is my YouTube so quiet? And then I go into my fucking Pulse Audio, fucking audio controller, and I see like, oh, YouTube in general is just, or my Chrome thing, my Vivaldi browser, is just turned down to 70%. I don't know when that happened, but I fixed it and it all sounds just fine. So, a little bit kludgy on that one. I'll agree with him on that.
Screen sharing across Slack, Teams, and Discord are kind of sketchy at best. They feel less stable, or they're even missing some features here or there.
Yeah, I've run into this problem myself. Discord is just missing a few features here and there. That's just because the Discord Linux distribution just isn't fully featured. I can't stream audio over my Discord streams on Linux, which is kind of annoying because sometimes I host movie nights with my friends. Can't do that when I'm running Linux, so if I'm the one who ends up hosting the thing, I have to turn off my computer and switch back to Windows, At some point, I'm probably just gonna have to fucking buckle down and set up a virtual machine. That's gonna be a fucking nightmare, though. Who knows if I'm gonna be able to fucking get video output, because my processor doesn't support dedicated video, and my GPU is being used to pump all my video through Linux. So maybe there's a fucking solution, but
In the end, it worked. If you connected to the stream after we were done about 15 minutes of troubleshooting while we were just in the thick of trying not to starve, I'm sure any random viewer wouldn't have been able to tell a difference between one of my old Windows streams and this one. Audio was good, capture was good. That's where the good ends, however. Literally everything I used past this point was a lesser experience compared to its Windows counterpart. Almost everything was missing at least one feature, and some, I'd say most notably OBS and Teams, were just buggy, requiring restarts for simple settings to actually apply, and had other various problems. It definitely wasn't impossible, and it was actually easier than I expected, but due to various bugs, missing features, and incompatible software, it wasn't as simple or clean as doing it on Windows, but I wouldn't say that was enough for it to be a deal breaker.
that's actually a very fair assessment. Trying to do all of this shit that I've been doing on Linux certainly was not as easy as it was on Windows. I definitely had a lot of, like, trials to go through to get everything working. But it wasn't so bad that I thought to myself, yeah, I'm just gonna go back to Windows, fuck this. Now, that is because I have a very deep core urge to separate myself from Windows, so I had to get it working on Linux, because God help me, I will not switch back to Windows, even if my life depended on it. And that's my mindset at work, where it's just like, hey, I just straight up don't want to use Windows anymore. I hate having to go back to Windows in order to run Halo Infinite. It's fucking annoying, and I constantly get a bunch of shitty pop-ups and updates going along. I'm not updating Windows. I'm just not. I just want to play Halo with my friends. Please make it work on Linux, dear God. I will become the biggest fucking Halo Linux YouTuber on the fucking planet if I have to. I will suck a dick. I will suck a dick at Microsoft to make Linux and Halo be compatible with each other. I don't care. I hate Windows. Ooh, I hate it. And I guess Linus and Luke just don't share my same deep hatred of Windows. So I don't foresee either of these guys sticking with Linux after the challenge is over. I think as soon as one of them caves, the other one's going to cave immediately afterwards, and I genuinely can't blame them for it, especially after all the backlash they've been getting for everything that they've been doing apparently wrong on their own distributions from the toxic as shit Linux community.
For me, the bottom line is what you're looking to get out of it. If you're daily driving Linux for game streaming out of a genuine passion for learning more about it, then have at it, have fun, but just know what you're getting into. PC gaming already requires a certain amount of tinkering. I mean, there's a reason that more people game on consoles. You know, whether it's trying to track down save files in some Vista era folder or forcing an aspect ratio in an INI file. But a Linux gaming PC, it requires all of that crap and then another mountain of crap on top of it.
That is actually kind of fair. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say that there's a mountain of crap on top of the already complicated PC gamer experience. I would say you are adding on another layer of complexity, obviously, because you're running Linux, and Linux is just going to be that little bit more complex than Windows, right? And like I said earlier, I have that passion in my heart of just, I'm gonna make this shit work, probably out of spite. I don't care. I'm gonna make it work. And if you're someone who just doesn't give a shit about the politics of free and open source, and if you don't hate Windows and you just want to game on your computer, yeah, okay then, sure, whatever. You know, I used to think that this stuff was easy, and I still do think it's easy. I still think that it is simple to understand and simple to grasp, but I'm me. Like, I'm not my friends who just want to come home and play Yakuza, you know? I'm not my friends who just want a game on their computer or have only ever used a Mac before in their lives. I'm not these people. So for me to say that it's easy and it's straightforward and it's simple in some aspects, it's not going to be the same as other people's definition of easy or straightforward or whatever. And I do agree with Linus and Luke in some regards, where I do think that it is relatively straightforward to use Linux, but trying to do anything higher end like streaming or video production or art or anything else, yeah, you're gonna be adding a lot more on top of that, and you're gonna need to be prepared to really dig into Linux's core to try to get what you want out of it. Because it's not going to be straightforward. It just isn't when you're trying to do something higher end. And I think that's kind of where I'm gonna end this video because, you know, they're ending this video right now. I think I've covered pretty much all of my opinions, both on this video and their experiences with Linux and how that reflects my experiences with Linux. You know, it's just how it is, and it's not for everybody. Linux is not for everybody. I still hold true that you should try it to see if it's for you or not. If you've come out of an experience of running Linux for like a week, maybe less than that, and you think to yourself, this just really isn't for me, I'm not going to blame you, and I'm going to maintain that opinion throughout my entirety of covering Linux distros or covering Linux in general. Like, I will never get mad at someone who thinks, yeah, this just isn't for me. Totally understandable. As we end this video, I want to go ahead and thank a few people. I want to thank my patrons who give me money. I want to thank Linus and Luke for going through with all of this stuff, because it is shining a light on a lot of things. And I also want to thank you. Yes, you, for making it to the end of this video, because you'd be really surprised at just how much that helps me as a creator. So if you're listening to my words right now, thank you. And again, let's actually thank the patrons. Again, they give me money, so I have to thank them. Their names are being shown wherever the fuck I decide to put them in the video. If you want to gain access to videos a whole day early, if you want to gain access to bonus videos, if you want to gain access to behind-the-scenes stuff, you can go down into my Patreon. There's going to be a link at both at the end of the video and in the description down below, and you can see more details on that. I actually think I need to update some stuff on my Patreon, because I have started doing more things, like bonus videos. There's not going to be a bonus video with this video. However, the video that comes out later on Sunday for everybody else, but Saturday for patrons, that'll have a bonus video, and I'll cover that more in depth when the weekly video comes out. This is just a bonus video for everybody, and just to, you know, talk about Linux again. So, hey, if you're excited for me to talk about Linux again, you just get a bonus video. Happy days for you. Thanks again for watching this video. It does mean a lot. Let me know how your experience on Linux is, if you've decided to take the plunge and switch over, or even if you're an experienced Linux user, because I know you're going to give me your opinions anyway, because you're a Linux user. Have a good day, everybody.